She was using a piece of cardboard to keep the snow off her newborn's face. He was 30 feet away in a heated car. He didn't get out. Not for 4 minutes. Not because he didn't see her. He saw her the moment he wiped the fog from his window. Young woman. Bus stop. Baby strapped to her chest in a carrier. Cardboard held at an angle above the infant's face, adjusted every 30 seconds as the snow shifted direction. She had figured out the angle. That was what stopped him. Not the cardboard, not the snow. The fact that she had already solved the problem with what she had looked at a wet piece of trash and turned it into shelter, and was now executing the solution with the focused, unhurried precision of someone who had been solving problems with whatever was available for a long time. He didn't get out because he didn't know what getting out would add. His umbrella wouldn't fix what had put her there. His money, handed over on a sidewalk, wouldn't fix it either. He picked up his phone. He called his architect. Riverside Commons, he said. Pull the file. I need it on my desk by 10. He hung up. He looked at her through the glass. She was still there. The bus wasn't. He had been sitting 30 feet away from a mother, shielding her newborn from snow with a piece of cardboard, and he had done nothing, and he was not going to tell himself that calling his architect was doing something, but he was going to make it true by 10 o'clock. He got out of the car. Nadia Okafor had a plan. She'd always had a plan. That was the thing people didn't understand about her situation. They saw cardboard and snow and a bus stop and drew conclusions that had nothing to do with who she was or how she'd gotten here. She wasn't someone who had stopped planning. She was someone whose plan had encountered something it hadn't accounted for. There was a difference. The plan had started 3 years ago when she'd moved to Boston from Baltimore with $2,400 in savings, a job offer at a medical billing company in Kenmore Square, and the specific, focused optimism of a 23-year-old who had looked at the numbers and decided they had worked. Not easily. Nothing in Boston worked easily, especially not housing, especially not on a medical billing salary, especially not as a black woman from Baltimore navigating a rental market that had very specific opinions about who it was for. But she'd found the apartment on Humboldt Avenue. 3rd floor, 1 bedroom, $1,340 a month, which was the kind of number that required careful management but was manageable if you were careful. She was careful. She'd built a life on being careful. She'd been promoted twice at the billing company. She'd taken a night class in healthcare administration at UMass Boston because the plan included moving up, not just staying stable. She'd paid off her car in 14 months. She'd put $200 into savings every month without exception, including the month her wisdom teeth came out, and the month the car needed new brakes, and the month her mother had a health scare in Baltimore, and Nadia had driven down and back in the same weekend because she couldn't afford to miss work. She'd saved $6,800. She'd met Darius at a work conference in 2021. He was there, then he wasn't, not dramatically, not with an argument or a betrayal, just a gradual recession. The way people sometimes receded when the reality of what was coming became real to them, and the reality was more than they'd planned for. She hadn't planned for him to leave. She'd re-planned without him. The baby had been in the new plan from the beginning. Elijah, whose name she'd chosen at 6 months when it had become real enough to name. The plan included 12 weeks of maternity leave, 8 weeks paid through her company's policy, 4 weeks unpaid that she'd saved for. The plan included a bassinet she'd bought secondhand and assembled herself on a Sunday afternoon in October, sitting on the floor of the 1-bedroom, with the instructions and a sense of accomplishment that had felt, in that moment, like evidence that she was going to be fine. She was going to be fine. Then the letter came, November 3rd, 41 days before her due date. The building had been sold, new ownership. All existing leases would be honored through December 31st. After that, the units would be renovated and relisted at market rate. Market rate for a 1-bedroom on Humboldt Avenue was $2,100. She made $52,000 a year. She'd done the math in the hallway outside her apartment with the letter in her hand and understood immediately that the math didn't work. Not at $2,100, not with a baby, not on her salary, not in any configuration she could produce. In the 10 minutes she stood there before her legs made a decision her brain hadn't caught up with yet. and she sat down on the hallway floor. She'd sat there for 6 minutes. Then she'd gotten up. She'd called 5 agencies. 4 had waiting lists measured in months. 1 had a room available, a shelter on Washington Street that took single mothers, that was clean and staffed and not what she'd imagined, and also the only option available before December 31st. She'd moved in on December 28th, 3 days before Elijah arrived. He'd come early, not dangerously, just determinedly, at 36 weeks, as though he'd understood that the situation outside was already complicated enough and had decided to add to it in his own way. She'd been in the shelter when her water broke. She'd taken a cab to Boston Medical. She'd been alone in the delivery room because there was no one to call who could get there faster than the cab, and she decided that alone was fine. Alone was manageable. She'd been managing alone for 2 months, and she knew how to do it. She'd done it. Elijah had arrived at 4:47 in the morning on January 3rd, weighing 8 kilograms, small but healthy, the nurse had said, small but strong. He had her nose and her mother's forehead, and the specific, ancient expression of a person who had just arrived somewhere and was taking stock. She'd held him and understood, in the full weight of the word, that the plan had changed again. Not ended. Changed. She was good at changing the plan. The shelter had a policy: newborns under 14 days couldn't stay in the communal rooms because of infection risk. She'd known about the policy before Elijah arrived. She'd asked about the family room. The family room had a 6-week waiting list. She'd put her name on it the day she arrived in December. She was 4 weeks from the front of the list. In the meantime, she had a room, small, private, a concession the shelter had made given the circumstances. And she had Elijah, and she had the $6,800 she'd saved, and she had the plan, which now included nursing school applications in the family room, and a timeline that was longer than she'd wanted and shorter than despair. She had to get to the WIC office today. Not wanted to, had to. The WIC recertification was due by end of week. Without recertification, she lost the food benefits. Without food benefits, she couldn't buy the groceries she needed to maintain her milk supply. Without milk supply, Elijah lost the one thing she could give him that cost nothing and mattered most. The bus came every 22 minutes. She'd timed it. She'd left the shelter at 7:51 to catch the 8:3. The 8:3 had not come. At 8:09, the app had told her the next bus was the 8:25. At 8:11, the snow had started. She didn't have an umbrella. She'd had one in December, but the shelters lost and found had a specific relationship with umbrellas, and hers had become part of that relationship sometime in the first week. She'd found the cardboard in the recycling bin at the corner. Not a desperate decision, a practical one. She'd looked at what was available and had determined that cardboard, held at the right angle, would keep the snow off Elijah's face until the bus came. She'd found the right angle in 30 seconds. She'd been holding it for 4 minutes. Elijah was dry. That was the measure that mattered. Everything else, the cold, the wet shoes, the 22-minute gap in the bus schedule, the man in the car 30 feet away who had been watching her for 4 minutes, all of it was context. Elijah was dry. She had a plan. The plan was still working. Marcus Webb had grown up in Roxbury, not the Roxbury that existed now. The one with the new condos on Warren Street, and the coffee shops charged $7 nice for something involving oat milk, and the real estate listings that described the neighborhood as up and coming in the specific language of people who had decided a place was valuable after other people had already made it so. The Roxbury of 1978. Public housing on Walnut Avenue. 3rd floor. 2 bedrooms for 5 people. His mother, his grandmother, his 2 sisters, and Marcus, who had slept on a pull-out couch in the living room from age 6 to age 14 and had learned in that time to read the quality of silence in a room. The silence that meant money was fine. The silence that meant money was not fine. The silence that meant his mother was doing math in her head, and the math was not producing a good answer. He knew that silence. He hadn't heard it in 30 years. His mother had been 26 when she had him. Same age Nadia looked now, standing at the bus stop with the cardboard. He didn't know Nadia was 26. He didn't know her name. He knew she was young and alone, and had figured out the cardboard angle in 30 seconds. And that was enough to know something real about her. His mother had been good at angles too. Not cardboard, everything else. The angle of stretching a pound of ground beef across 4 meals. The angle of explaining to a 7-year-old why the heat was lower this month without explaining why the heat was lower this month. The angle of showing up to his school conferences in her work uniform because she couldn't go home and change and still make it on time, and holding her head in a way that made the uniform irrelevant. She'd found the angle in 30 seconds, too. Every time. He'd watched her do it for 18 years and had understood, at some point during those years, that what she was doing was not surviving. It was a form of engineering, the specific, unglamorous, unacknowledged engineering of someone building a stable structure from unstable materials. He'd left Roxbury at 18 on a scholarship to BU. He'd built a web development group from a $40,000 loan his mother had given him in 1992. Her savings, 7 years of it, handed to him in an envelope with a note that said, "Pay me back when you can. Build something that lasts." He'd paid her back in 1999. She'd refused the interest. He'd built things that lasted. 31 years, $2. $1 billion in assets. Commercial properties, residential developments, the community investment fund he'd started in 2008 because the financial crisis had made it clear that the market alone was not going to solve the housing problem. And someone with capital needed to decide that capital wasn't the only measure of what was worth building. He'd decided that. He'd meant it when he decided it. Riverside Commons had been the decision made real. 340 units of affordable housing in East Boston, designed for exactly the people the market had stopped designing for: families, single parents, people who made $40,000 to $60,000 a year and needed a place to live that wasn't 3 hours from their job or half their income or both. He'd approved the project in 2021. It had not been built. 6 delays. He could name them: permitting issues, material costs, interest rate environment, contractor availability, community board concerns, market conditions. Each one had been real. Each one had been presented to him by Daniel Park, his CFO, with a financial analysis showing that proceeding under current conditions would reduce the project's already thin margins to something the board would not approve. He'd accepted each delay, not without discomfort, with the specific managed discomfort of someone who understood that discomfort was not the same as action, and that accepting a delay was not the same as abandoning a project, and that sometimes the responsible thing was to wait for better conditions. He'd been waiting for better conditions for 3 years. Sitting in his car on Tremont Street at 8:14 in the morning, looking through cleared glass at a woman holding cardboard over a baby's face, he understood something he should have understood in the first delay. Better conditions were not coming. They were never coming. The conditions that made affordable housing financially difficult to build were the same conditions that made affordable housing necessary. They were not going to resolve themselves into a moment when the project was easy and the margins were comfortable and the board approved it without discussion. The project was supposed to be hard. That was the point. He'd confused waiting for the right conditions with waiting for the wrong conditions to become the right conditions, which was not waiting. It was giving up in slow motion while maintaining the posture of patience. He'd been giving up in slow motion for 3 years. He thought about Daniel Park. Daniel was not wrong. His analyses were accurate. His job was to protect the company's financial position, and he'd been doing that job correctly. The problem was not Daniel's analysis. The problem was that Daniel's analysis measured what it could measure: margins, rates, costs, timelines, and did not measure what it couldn't. It couldn't measure Nadia's cardboard. It couldn't measure the angle she'd found in 30 seconds. It couldn't measure 8 kilograms, the weight of a child whose first 11 days had been spent in a shelter because the building his mother had planned to raise him in had been sold to someone who could charge more for it. None of that was in Daniel's spreadsheet. He'd built his career on understanding that the spreadsheet was necessary and insufficient. He'd known that at 30. He'd forgotten it somewhere between then and 54, in the accumulation of quarterly reviews and board presentations, and the specific gradual drift of a man who had started close to the problem and had moved further from it with every floor his company added to its portfolio. He'd wiped the fog from his window at 8:14 and had seen her. He'd called his architect at 8:18. He was getting out of the car at 8:19, not to fix what was wrong today, because today had shown him what wrong looked like, and he was not going to sit behind glass and let it be abstract anymore. He came around the front of the car, not running. Walking, the deliberate pace of someone who had decided something and was executing the decision without performance. She heard him before she saw him. Footsteps on wet pavement. She developed, in 11 days of shelter living, a specific alertness to approaching footsteps. Not fear exactly. More the automatic calibration of someone who had learned that strangers approaching in uncertain circumstances required assessment before response. She assessed him. Tall, well-dressed in the understated way of people who didn't need clothing to announce anything. No umbrella. Coming from the direction of the black SUV that had been idling at the curb. He stopped 6 feet away, not close enough to crowd, far enough to give her the option of the conversation. "The bus is running late," he said. She looked at him. "I know," she said. He looked at the cardboard. At Elijah's face beneath it, dry, eyes closed, entirely unaware of the weather and the bus schedule, and the man 6 feet away who had just gotten out of a warm car. "How old?" he said. 11 days, she said. He was quiet for a moment. "My car has heat," he said, "if you want to wait inside." She looked at the SUV, then at him. The assessment was fast and accurate, and he could see her running it. Not paranoid practical. The specific risk calculation of a woman alone with an infant considering an offer from a stranger. "The bus comes in 6 minutes, she said. "I know," he said. "The offer stands for 6 minutes. She looked at Elijah. At the cardboard getting heavier with wet snow. At the 6 minutes between now and the bus. "Okay," she said. The SUV was warm. She felt it hit her face when she got in. The specific, almost painful relief of moving from cold into heat when you've been cold long enough that you'd stopped registering it as cold and had started registering it as normal. She adjusted Elijah in the carrier. He made a sound. Not distress, inventory, the specific small noise of a person checking on their own status. "He's okay," Marcus said. He was in the driver's seat. He'd gone around while she got in the back. "He's always okay," she said. "He doesn't know yet that things can be not okay." He looked at her in the rearview mirror. She looked back. "Nadia," she said. Not because he'd asked, because being in someone's car for 6 minutes required a name. "Marcus," he said. She looked out the window. At the bus stop. At the spot where she'd been standing. The cardboard was still there. She'd set it against the pole when she got in. The automatic tidiness of someone who didn't leave things on the ground. "You kept the cardboard," he said. "Someone else might need it," she said. He looked at the cardboard against the pole. He didn't say anything. She didn't elaborate. Outside, the snow was making up its mind, committing now, the flakes larger, the kind of snow that meant something. "Where are you headed?" he said. "Wick office on Mass Ave," she said. "Recertification. For the food benefits," he said. She looked at him in the mirror. "You know what Wick is," she said. "My mother used it," he said. "In the 80s. She absorbed that. Filed it. If you miss the recertification," he started. "I won't miss it," she said. "That's why I'm out here." He nodded. She looked at Elijah. He'd fallen back to sleep, the deep, absolute sleep of a person with no unresolved concerns. She adjusted the carrier slightly, tucked the edge of his hat. 11 days, Marcus said. "You're out in this at 11 days. The office closes at 4, she said. "I work with what's open." "Where's his father?" She looked at him in the mirror, not with anger. With the flat, assessing patience of someone who had been asked that question before and had developed an efficient answer. "Not here," she said. "I'm sorry, I'm not," she said. "I mean, I was. Now I just work with what I have." He looked at the street, at the snow coming down on a city that had opinions about everything, except the gap between what it cost to live here and what most people made. "Where are you staying?" he said. She was quiet for a moment, not deciding whether to tell him, deciding how much context the answer required. "Shelter on Washington Street," she said. "Temporarily. I'm on the list for a family room." "How long's the list?" 4 weeks, she said. "Maybe less." He nodded. "And before the shelter?" he said. "Humboldt Avenue," she said. 3rd floor. 1 bedroom. The building sold in November. New owners wanted vacant possession by January 1st. He looked at his hands on the steering wheel. "You had 40 days notice," he said. 41, she said. "With a baby coming," he said. "With Elijah coming," she said. "Yes." The distinction was not small, and he understood that. She watched him understand it. I had a plan, she said. The plan didn't account for the building being sold. She looked at Elijah. Plans don't usually account for the thing that ends them. That's what makes them plans, and not just waiting for something to go wrong. He looked at her in the mirror. He started. The bus, she said. He looked up. The 825 was coming around the corner. She reached for the door handle. I can drive you, he said to the WIC office. She stopped, looked at him, the assessment again. Faster this time, she'd been in the car with him for 4 minutes and had accumulated enough data to run it faster. You have a 9 o'clock, she said. He looked at her. You said that on the phone, she said. When you called whoever you called. He had said that. She'd heard him through the window before she'd agreed to get in. I'll move it, he said. She looked at the bus, at the warm car, at Elijah asleep in the carrier, at the man in the driver's seat who had grown up in Roxbury and knew what WIC was and had gotten out of a warm car in the snow, and whose 9 o'clock was apparently negotiable. Okay, she said. She let go of the door handle. The bus went past without stopping. The WIC office on Mass Ave opened at 9. They were 20 minutes early. Marcus parked on the street. He didn't suggest waiting somewhere warmer. A coffee shop. The car. He parked and looked at the office and then at Nadia in the rearview mirror. We can wait here, he said. Okay, she said. They waited. Not uncomfortably. The specific neutral silence of two people who didn't know each other well enough for small talk and knew each other well enough to skip. Elijah made the inventory sound again. Nadia checked him. Hat still on. Face warm. She ran 2 fingers along his cheek the way she'd been doing since the hospital. Not checking temperature exactly, just confirming. Present. Here, fine, I ask you something? Can I ask you something? Marcus, she said. The shelter, he said. The family room you're waiting for. What's the difference? She looked at him in the mirror. The communal room has 12 beds, she said. Women only, no children under 2 weeks. Elijah was 2 days old when I came back from the hospital. I got a private room, small, a concession, because of the age policy. And the family room? Bigger, she said. Private bathroom. Stays with Elijah don't count against my 90-day limit the way the current room does. She paused. And it has a window that faces east. Morning light. He looked at her. You know which direction the window faces, he said. I toured it in December, she said, before Elijah came. I wanted to know what we were waiting for. He thought about that. A woman 8 months pregnant touring a shelter family room and noting which direction the window faced. Not hopelessness. Navigation. The list, he said. 4 weeks. Is that guaranteed? Nothing is guaranteed, she said. But I'm number 3. 2 families ahead of me. One is transitioning to permanent housing next week. The other has been there 11 weeks, and their caseworker is working on placement. She paused. I track it. How? I asked the intake coordinator if she'd let me know when the list moved, she said. She said yes. She texted me. A pause. People will do things if you ask them clearly and don't make it their problem. He looked at the office. At the lights coming on inside. Someone unlocking. Nadia, he said. Yes, she said. The building on Humboldt, he said. Do you know who bought it? She looked at him. A development company, she said. I looked it up when I got the notice. Web something. He was very still. She watched his hands on the steering wheel. Web Development Group, he said. She looked at him. At the name on the building permit she'd pulled up on her phone in November, standing in the hallway with the letter, because she'd needed to understand what had happened, and understanding required specifics. That's your company, she said. Not a question. Yes, he said. The office opened. A woman in a blue lanyard unlocked the front door and propped it open and went back inside. Nadia looked at the open door, at the man in the driver's seat, at the name she'd looked up in November. You didn't know, she said, not letting him off, reading what was actually true. I knew the acquisition, he said. I didn't know the tenants. There were 14 units, she said. I looked that up too. I know, he said. 14 families, she said. With 41 days. I know, he said. She looked at Elijah. At 11 days old, sleeping through a conversation about the decision that had put him in a shelter. She thought about what to do with what she was feeling. Not anger exactly. Anger required energy she was allocating elsewhere. Something more precise. The thief. The specific, clear-eyed accounting of someone who had learned that understanding what happened was more useful than having feelings about it in the presence of the person who had made it happen. The company that bought it from you, she said. What are they doing with it? Renovation, he said. Market rate rentals. $2,100, she said. Probably more by the time they're done, he said. She nodded. And the 14 families, she said. That was in the acquisition analysis? He was quiet. It should have been, he said. But it wasn't, she said. No, he said. She looked at the open door of the WIC office. I need to go in, she said. I know, he said. I'll wait. She looked at him. You don't have to, she said. I know, he said. She got out. She went to the door. She stopped. She turned back. Marcus, she said. He looked at her through the open car door. Elijah, she said. Can you hold him while I do the paperwork? It goes faster with 2 hands. He looked at the baby in the carrier, at 2. 8 kilograms of person looking back at him with the ancient, unfocused gaze of someone who had arrived 11 days ago and was still taking stock. He started. I'll show you, she said. It's not hard. She came back to the car. She showed him how to support the head, where to put his hands, how to hold the weight so it was distributed and not just in one place. He listened carefully. He held out his arms. She transferred Elijah. He felt the weight of it. 8 kilograms, not heavy in any absolute sense. Lighter than most things he'd carried in his professional life. Lighter than the Riverside Commons file sitting on his back seat. Lighter than the quarterly reports that described his company's financial position in numbers that required context to understand. But different from those things in a way that the word heavy didn't capture. Specific, present. Requiring something from him immediately and directly, not a decision, not a signature, not a memo, just his hands. Steady. Here. He looked at Elijah. Elijah looked at him. Or in his direction. At 11 days old, the focus wasn't precise, but the orientation was. He was facing Marcus with the specific, ancient attention of someone who had recently arrived and was still determining what everything was. He's looking at you, Nadia said. I don't think he can see me properly yet, Marcus said. No, she said, but he can feel if you're steady. She went inside. He sat in the driver's seat of his car in front of the WIC office on Mass Ave in Boston at 9:03 in the morning, holding a child who had been born 11 days ago into a situation created in part by a decision he had made without understanding what the decision was about. He held him steadily. He looked at the Riverside Commons file on the back seat. 340 units. He thought about Daniel Park's analysis, about margins and rates and conditions, about 6 delays and the specific managed discomfort of a man who had understood that delay was not the same as abandonment. He thought about 8 kilograms, about what it felt like to hold something that required your steadiness and gave you nothing in return except the fact of itself. Present, specific, here. He thought about his mother on Walnut Avenue, about the silence he'd learned to read, about the envelope she'd handed him in 1992 with 7 years of savings inside it, about build something that lasts. He looked at the file. He looked at Elijah. He thought about what lasts, not the building, not the margin, not the quarterly return, the thing the building was supposed to make possible. Elijah made the inventory sound. Marcus adjusted his hold. The baby settled. I've got you, Marcus said. He hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way true things sometimes came out, before the part of your mind that managed appearances had time to review it. He meant it about Elijah. He meant it about more than Elijah. She was inside for 22 minutes. He knew because he tracked it the way he tracked everything. Not obsessively. Automatically. The habit of someone who had learned that time was the one resource that didn't replenish. Elijah slept for 19 of those minutes. The remaining 3 he was awake and doing the inventory thing, and Marcus talked to him. Not baby talk. Just talk. The specific, slightly self-conscious monologue of a man who had never been alone with an infant and had decided that silence was worse than saying something. He talked about the street outside, about the snow, which had committed now, covering the sidewalk in the specific equalizing way that snow covered things, making the clean and dirty indistinguishable, making the new and old look the same. He talked about the building across the street. 1960s construction. Brick. The kind of building that had been built when Boston was building for people who lived in Boston rather than for people who might move to Boston if the amenities were right. Solid. Unglamorous, still standing. Elijah looked in his direction and made a sound. I know, Marcus said. I'm not that interesting. Nadia came out at 9:31. She saw him through the windshield. In the driver's seat, Elijah against his chest, talking. She stopped on the sidewalk for a moment. He didn't see her stop. She watched him for 3 seconds before she came to the car. She got in the back. He transferred Elijah, carefully the way she'd shown him, supporting the head. How'd it go? He said. Done, she said, recertified through April. Good, he said. She settled Elijah back into the carry, checked the hat, ran 2 fingers along his cheek. Present. Here, fine. You were talking to him, she said. He was awake, Marcus said. It seemed rude not to. She looked at him. Something crossed her face. Not quite a smile. The thing that came before one, the specific expression of someone receiving something unexpected and deciding whether to let it land. She let it land. What were you talking about? She said. That building, he said. The brick one. She looked at it. What about it? It's still standing. 60 years. Built for people who lived here. She looked at it for a moment. There's a laundromat on the ground floor, she said. Been there since I moved to the neighborhood. Open at 6 in the morning. The owner knows everyone's name. He looked at the laundromat. At the lights on inside. A woman folding something at the counter. A man waiting by the machines. That's not in any development analysis I've ever read, he said. No, she said, it wouldn't be. He looked at the Riverside Commons file on the back seat. She followed his gaze. Is that the project? She said. He looked at her. You know about it? He said. I looked up web development in November, she said, when I got the notice. I read everything I could find about the company. She paused. There was an article about Riverside Commons, 340 units, East Boston, approved in 2021. It hasn't been built, he said. I know, she said. I checked. He looked at her. He looked at her, at the woman who had been evicted with 41 days' notice while 8 months pregnant and had spent part of that time researching the company that had bought her building. Why did you check? He said. Because understanding what happened is more useful than just being angry about it, she said. And because Riverside Commons, if it gets built, is the kind of project that changes what's available. Not for me, for the next person. He was quiet. You were thinking about the next person, he said, while you were being evicted. I was thinking about a lot of things, she said. That was one of them. He looked at the file. It's been delayed 6 times, he said. I know, she said. The article mentioned 2. I assumed there were more. Why? Because 2 delays on a project like that usually means the commitment isn't there, she said. Not the money, the commitment. She paused. Money follows commitment. It doesn't lead it. He looked at her. Where did you learn that? He said. My mother, she said. She ran a community savings group in Baltimore for 15 years. 12 women. They pooled money every month and took turns using it for what they needed. No interest, no paperwork. Just commitment and trust. Araska, he said. She looked at him. Rotating Savings and Credit Association, he said. They're common in West African communities. My grandmother was in one in Roxbury. I know what it is, she said. I grew up in one. I know, he said. That's why I said it. They looked at each other. The specific moment of 2 people discovering they came from the same place by different routes. The commitment, Marcus said. For Riverside Commons, it was there in 2021. And now? She said. He looked at the file. At 6 delay memos from Daniel Park, each with accurate numbers and reasonable conclusions and the specific systemic blindness of an analysis that measured what it could measure. It's still there, he said. I just let it get buried under the conditions. The conditions aren't going to change, she said. I know that now, he said. You knew it before, she said. Not unkindly, accurately. He looked at the laundromat, at the woman folding, the man waiting. The lights on at 9 in the morning because someone had decided that 6 a was when people needed a laundromat and had opened at 6 every morning for however many years that light had been on. Yes, he said. I knew it before. She looked at Elijah. The 6 delays, she said. How much did they cost? He thought about it. Not the financial cost. The other cost. The cost that didn't appear in Daniel's analysis, because Daniel's analysis measured what happened, not what didn't happen. 340 units not built for 3 years. 340 families still navigating a market that had no room for them. 14 families on Humboldt Avenue with 41 days' notice. 1 woman at a bus stop in the snow with a piece of cardboard. More than the project would have, he said. She nodded, not satisfied, not vindicated, just receiving an accurate answer. What are you going to do? She said. Build it, he said. This year, whatever the conditions are. She looked at him, reading him the way she'd been reading him since the bus stop. For the gap between what was said and what was meant, she didn't find a gap. The east-facing window, she said. He looked at her. In the family room, she said, at the shelter. I know which direction it faces because I wanted to know what we were waiting for. She paused. When you build Riverside Commons, make sure some of the units have east-facing windows. Morning light matters when everything else is uncertain. He looked at the file. At 340 units designed by architects who had never lived in a shelter, at specifications that accounted for square footage and load-bearing walls and fire egress, and had not accounted for which direction the windows faced. He picked up his phone. He texted his architect. Riverside Commons. Add to brief east-facing windows in all family units. Non-negotiable. He put the phone down. Done, he said. She looked at him. That's not enough, she said. I know, he said. It's a start. She looked at the street, at the snow still coming down, at the cardboard still leaning against the pole at the bus stop. Someone took it, she said. He looked. The cardboard was gone. She was almost smiling. Good, she said. He drove her back to the shelter at 10:15, not directly. She had 2 more stops. A pharmacy on Tremont for Elijah's vitamin D drops, which the pediatrician had prescribed at the hospital and which cost $11 and which she'd been budgeting for since discharge, and a grocery store on Washington, because she needed specific things for her milk supply. And specific things didn't always mean expensive things, but they meant knowing what you needed and getting exactly that. He drove her to both. He didn't offer to pay at the pharmacy. She noticed that. Most people in his position would have offered. The offer would have been well-intentioned and would have required her to either accept something she hadn't asked for or decline something she needed. He'd understood, somehow, that the not offering was the more useful thing. She paid the $11. He waited with Elijah in the car. At the grocery store, she was 12 minutes. She came out with 2 bags, not heavy, specific. The things she'd known she needed before she left the shelter that morning, written on a list on her phone, purchased in the order they appeared on the list, because efficiency in a grocery store was the kind of thing you learned when grocery stores were not casual. He put the bags in the trunk without being asked. She got in. Thank you, she said. For the trunk, he said. For not offering to pay at the pharmacy, she said. He looked at her in the mirror. I thought about it, he said. I know, she said. That's why I'm thanking you for not. He drove. The snow had stopped. Boston doing the thing it did after snow. The specific temporary clarity of a city that had been covered and was now revealing itself again. The surfaces clean, the edges sharp, everything looking briefly like a better version of itself before the traffic and the salt and the afternoon took over. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. You keep asking if you can ask, she said. Just ask. The savings group your mother ran, he said. 12 women. 15 years. What made it work? She thought about it. Trust built through proximity, she said. They knew each other, not just names, situations. Who was having a hard month, who had just gotten a raise, who needed the pot in February because the furnace had gone. She paused. The money worked because the relationships worked. You can't replicate that with a form. He thought about Daniel Park's financial models, about the due diligence process for Riverside Commons, the market analysis, the demographic surveys, the community impact projections. All of it accurate, none of it proximate. Riverside Commons, he said. The community engagement we did in 2021. 3 town halls, survey forms, demographic data. I know, she said. I read the summary in the article. What did you think? He said. She was quiet for a moment. I think town halls tell you what people say in town halls, she said, which is not the same as what people know from living somewhere. What's the difference? He said. In a town hall, you answer the questions you're asked, she said. What you know from living somewhere is everything you didn't know you knew until someone asked the right question. He thought about the laundromat, open at 6. Owner knows everyone's name, not in any development analysis he'd ever read. What's the right question? He said. She looked at him in the mirror. You already asked it this morning, she said. He thought back. Through the bus stop and the car and the WIC office and the pharmacy. East-facing windows, he said. No, she said. Before that, he thought. What would have changed everything, he said, before today? You didn't ask me that, she said. But you were going to. I could see it. He looked at the road. What would have changed everything, he said, before today? She looked at Elijah. A longer notice period, she said. 90 days instead of 41. That's the law in some states. Not Massachusetts. I know, he said. A right of first refusal, she said, when the building sold. Tenants get the option to match the offer or find a buyer who will keep the units affordable. That's policy in some cities, not Boston. I know, he said. A moving assistance fund, she said. Something. Anything. 41 days to find housing in Boston in November is not enough time. It's not enough time in any city, but it's especially not enough time here. I know, he said. She looked at him. You know all of this, she said. Then why? She started. Because knowing it and doing something about it are different, he said. And I've been on the knowing side for too long. She was quiet. The shelter was a block away. Marcus, she said. Yes, he said. Riverside Commons, she said. 340 units. How many are two-bedroom? About 100, he said. Maybe 110. Make it 140, she said. Two-bedroom units get taken by families. Families are the ones the market has stopped building for. One-bedrooms fill faster, but they don't solve the same problem. He looked at the file on the back seat. At the unit mix, his architects had designed for optimal revenue balance within the affordable housing framework. That changes the financial model, he said. I know, she said. But you said you're building it whatever the conditions are. He looked at her in the mirror. Yes, he said. I did. Then the conditions include the unit mix, she said. He pulled up in front of the shelter. A brick building on Washington Street. Clean, modest. The specific understated dignity of a place that did important work without the resources to announce it. He put the car in park. She reached for the door. Nadia, he said. She stopped. The tenant displacement policy, he said, for future acquisitions. 90 days notice, right of first refusal, moving assistance. I'm going to build that into our standard acquisition terms. She looked at him. That will make some acquisitions less attractive, she said. I know, he said. Some you won't be able to do, she said. I know, he said. And you're doing it anyway, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at the shelter. At the door she'd walked through 41 days after getting a letter that her building had been sold. At the building she was still walking through. Build it right, she said. Not just Riverside Commons. The whole thing. The acquisition policy, the unit mix, the notice periods. Build it like it's going to matter to people you'll never meet. Because it will, he said. Because it will, she confirmed. She got out. She took the grocery bags from the trunk. He'd come around to help, but she already had them. Both handles in one hand, Elijah in the carrier on her chest. The specific one-handed efficiency of a woman who had been managing two things simultaneously for 11 days and had gotten good at it. She walked to the door. At the entrance she stopped. She turned around. Marcus, she said. He was still by the car. The cardboard, she said. Whoever took it, they needed it more than the recycling bin did. He looked at her. That's how it works, she said. Things go where they're needed. You just have to stop hoarding them. She went inside. He stood on the sidewalk. He looked at the shelter door, at the building, at the street, at the city that had opinions about everything except the gap between what it cost to live here and what most people made. He picked up his phone. He called Daniel Park. The Riverside Commons model, he said. I need you in my office at 2. We're rebuilding it. Rebuilding it how? Daniel said. From the foundation, Marcus said. Literally. He hung up. He looked at the shelter door one more time. Then he got in the car. He had work to do. Daniel Park had been CFO of web development for 11 years. He was good at his job in the way that mattered most. Not just the numbers, the honesty behind the numbers. He didn't tell Marcus what Marcus wanted to hear. He told him what the numbers said and let Marcus decide what to do with them. That was the arrangement. It had worked for 11 years. He walked into Marcus's office at 2:03 and sat down across the desk and looked at the Riverside Commons file open between them and at Marcus, who had the specific expression of a man who had made a decision before the meeting and was using the meeting to implement it rather than reach it. Daniel recognized the expression. He'd seen it twice before in 11 years. Both times it had produced something significant. You want to rebuild the model, Daniel said. Yes, Marcus said. From the foundation, Daniel said. Your words, yes, Marcus said. Daniel looked at the file. The current model works, he said. It's tight, but it works. The delays have been about conditions, not about the model itself. The delays have been about me, Marcus said, not the conditions. Daniel looked at him. The conditions were real, he said. They were real and I used them, Marcus said. There's a difference. Daniel was quiet. He picked up the file. He looked at the unit mix, the financial projections, the 6 delay memos he'd written, each with accurate numbers and reasonable conclusions. What do you want to change? He said. Marcus told him. Unit mix first, 142 bedroom units instead of 110. Daniel wrote it down without commenting. He would comment later, with numbers. That was his job. Tenant displacement policy second. 90 days notice, right of first refusal, moving assistance fund built into future acquisition terms as a standard condition. That will affect deal flow, Daniel said. I know, Marcus said. Some acquisitions we won't be able to structure profitably under those terms, Daniel said. I know, Marcus said. You're accepting that, Daniel said. Yes, Marcus said. Daniel wrote it down. East-facing window in all family units. Non-negotiable, he'd already texted the architect. He wanted it in the brief before end of day. Windows are an architectural specification, Daniel said. That's not a financial. I know, Marcus said. Put it in anyway. Daniel put it in. The financial model, Marcus said. The way we've been building it, it measures what's profitable. I need it to also measure what's not built. Daniel looked at him. What's not built, he said. Every year Riverside Commons wasn't built, Marcus said. 340 families were still in a market with no room for them. That has a cost. Not to us, to them. I want that cost in the model. We can't quantify. I'm not asking you to quantify it precisely, Marcus said. I'm asking you to put it in the model as a variable. Something that exists. Something we're accounting for, even if we can't put an exact number on it. He paused. Right now our model pretends that cost doesn't exist because we don't bear it. I want us to stop pretending. Daniel looked at his notepad, at the things he'd written down. He was quiet for a moment. Marcus, he said, the board is going to push back on some of this. I know, Marcus said. The unit mix change alone reduces projected returns by, I know what it reduces, Marcus said. I did the math this morning. And you're proceeding, Daniel said. Yes, Marcus said. Daniel looked at him. What happened this morning, he said. Between 8 and 10. Marcus looked at the window. At Boston outside, the snow gone now, the city back to its ordinary self, the brief clarity of the post-snow hour already fading into the gray of a January afternoon. He thought about a bus stop on Tremont Street, about a piece of cardboard at the right angle, about 8 kilograms, and what it felt like to hold something that required your steadiness immediately and gave you nothing back except the fact of itself, about he can feel if you're steady. I met someone, he said. Who? Daniel said. A woman who was evicted from a building we sold, he said. She was at a bus stop in the snow with a newborn and a piece of cardboard. Daniel was very still. We sold Humboldt Avenue, he said. In October, Marcus said. 14 units. The acquisition was clean, Daniel said. Legally. I know, Marcus said. Legally, it was fine. Daniel understood the distinction. He'd been making that distinction in his own head for 11 years. Legal and fine were not the same thing, and he'd always known they weren't, and had kept his work on the legal side, and had not looked too directly at the fine side, because looking too directly was not his job. He understood, sitting in Marcus's office at 2:03 on a Tuesday afternoon, that the arrangement had just changed. The woman, Daniel said. What's her name? Nadia Okafor, Marcus said. Daniel wrote it down, not as a data point, as a name. Is she okay? Daniel said. She's managing, Marcus said. She's very good at managing. He paused. That's part of the problem. When people are very good at managing the things they shouldn't have to manage, we stop seeing the managing and start seeing the capability. Daniel looked at what he'd written, at the unit mix and the displacement policy and the east-facing windows and the variable cost of what wasn't built, at Nadia Okafor's name at the bottom. How long to rebuild the model? Marcus said. A week, Daniel said. If I start today. Start today, Marcus said. Daniel stood up. He picked up the file. He looked at Marcus. The board meeting is in 3 weeks, he said. I know, Marcus said. They're going to ask why, Daniel said. Why now? Why these changes? Why the timeline? Marcus looked at the window. Tell them the model was incomplete, he said. We were measuring what we could measure and calling it complete. We're correcting that. That's not a full answer, Daniel said. No, Marcus said. But it's the true one. Daniel nodded. He went to the door. Daniel, Marcus said. He turned. The displacement policy, Marcus said. For future acquisitions. When you build it into the terms, I want it to apply retroactively where we can make it apply. Humboldt Avenue sold. We can't undo that. But the tenants who were displaced, is there something we can do? Daniel thought about it. Moving assistance after the fact, he said. It's not policy, but we could structure it as a community investment. Reach out to the families, offer relocation support, connections to housing resources. 14 families, Marcus said. 14 families, Daniel confirmed. Start with Nadia Okafor, Marcus said. She's at the Washington Street shelter. Family room list 4 weeks out. I want to know if there's anything we can do to move that timeline. We can't control shelter placement, Daniel said. I know, Marcus said, but we can connect her to someone who knows the system better than she does. She's good at finding the angle. She just needs more angles available. Daniel wrote it down. One more thing, Marcus said. Yes, Daniel said. The board, Marcus said. 3 weeks. Before the meeting, I want every board member to visit a site, not Riverside Commons, a shelter, a WIC office, a community housing wait list. He paused. I want them to see what we're building into before they vote on what we're building. Daniel looked at him. That's unusual, he said. Yes, Marcus said. Some of them won't want to, Daniel said. I know, Marcus said. Ask them anyway. Daniel nodded. He went out. Marcus sat at his desk. He looked at the window. At Boston in January, gray, cold, the streets already drying from the morning snow. The city doing what it did, continuously, regardless of what happened in any particular car or bus stop or office on a particular Tuesday morning. He thought about Nadia's mother's savings group. 12 women, 15 years. Trust built through proximity. He thought about what proximity meant for a company his size, not visiting, staying. The difference between a site visit and being present long enough to know which direction the windows face. He'd spent 30 years building from a distance. He wasn't going to stop building. He was going to get closer. He opened a new document. He typed at the top. What we measure determines what we build. What we build determines who can live here. Who can live here determines what kind of city this is. He looked at it. Then he typed one more line. Start with the foundation. He saved the document. He picked up the phone. He called his architect. Riverside Commons, he said. I need a meeting this week. Bring the full team. He paused. And bring someone who has lived in affordable housing. I don't care how you find them. Find them. He hung up. He looked at the file, at 6 delay memos, at a unit mix that was about to change, at east-facing windows that were now non-negotiable, at a model that was about to include the cost of what wasn't built. He thought about 8 kilograms, about holding something that required your steadiness and gave you nothing back except itself, about I've got you. He meant it then. He meant it now. Riverside Commons broke ground on a Thursday in April. Not a ceremony. Marcus had specifically said no ceremony. Ceremonies were for people who needed to announce things. This was for the people who needed the thing. He'd said that to his PR director, who had looked at him with the expression of someone receiving instructions they disagreed with professionally and were going to follow anyway. No ceremony, Marcus had said. Just build. They built. The groundbreaking was a Tuesday morning in April. Marcus had gotten the date wrong in his own calendar, had shown up on Thursday to find construction already underway, which was the best possible version of being wrong about a date. He stood at the perimeter and watched. Not with the specific performed satisfaction of a developer at a groundbreaking, with something quieter. The feeling of a thing that had been waiting becoming a thing that was happening. 340 units. 142 bedroom. East-facing windows in all family units. A laundry room on the ground floor. Open at 6 in the morning. Because Nadia had mentioned the Humboldt Avenue laundromat in passing 3 months ago, and he'd written it down. A community room designed by an architect who had spent 2 weeks living in affordable housing in East Boston before drawing a single line. Marcus had found her through a nonprofit, a woman named Grace, who had grown up in public housing in Dorchester, and had gone to architecture school on a scholarship and had come back to design for the neighborhoods she'd come from. Grace had asked to see the brief before she agreed. She'd read the east-facing windows specification. "Who asked for this?" she'd said. "A woman named Nadia," Marcus had said. She was waiting for a shelter family room. She'd toured it in December. She wanted to know what she was waiting for. Grace had been quiet for a moment. "I'll take the project," she said. The board had approved the revised model in February. Not without pushback. 3 members had concerns about the unit mix change and the reduced returns and the displacement policy that would affect future acquisitions. Marcus had expected the concerns. He'd prepared for them differently than he'd prepared for board concerns before. He hadn't brought Daniel's analysis. He'd brought photographs, not of Riverside Commons, of the WIC office on Mass Ave at 9 in the morning, of the Washington Street shelter, of a bus stop on Tremont Street with a piece of cardboard leaning against the pole. He'd taken the photographs himself. On the morning he'd driven Nadia to her appointments, he'd taken 3 photographs from the car before he got out, not to use them. He hadn't known he'd use them. Because he'd learned that morning that the gap between knowing something and feeling it was the gap between a report and a photograph, and he'd wanted to close that gap before it reopened. He'd shown the board the photographs. He hadn't explained them. He'd let them sit. Then he'd said, "The model we've been using measures what we gain. I want to show you what we've been not measuring." The vote had been 7-2. The 2 who voted no had their reasons noted and respected. The 7 who voted yes had, by Marcus's count, looked at the photograph of the bus stop for longer than they'd looked at any page of Daniel's revised model. That was information. Nadia moved into the Washington Street family room on February 3rd. Not Riverside Commons, that was still being built. The family room at the shelter, east-facing window, the one she'd toured in December when she'd wanted to know what she was waiting for. She'd been number 3 on the list. The 2 families ahead of her had moved to permanent housing in January. One through a housing voucher that had finally come through after 14 months, one through a cousin in Quincy who had a spare room and had finally said yes. The list moved. She moved with it. The room was small. It had a window that faced east. On the first morning she woke up early, not because Elijah needed her. He was still asleep, the deep boneless sleep of someone who had recently discovered that sleep was a thing and was investigating its full potential. She woke up because she'd been waking up early for 3 months, and her body had opinions about that. She sat in the chair by the window. She watched the light come in. Not dramatic. January light in Boston was not dramatic. It was thin and honest and arrived without announcement. She held Elijah. He made the inventory sound. She checked him. Hat on, face warm, present, here, fine. She thought about the cardboard, about whoever had taken it from the pole, about things going where they were needed. She thought about Marcus. She'd spoken to him twice since January. Once when his assistant had called to connect her with a housing navigator who knew the shelter system better than her cakes worker did, and once when Marcus had called himself to tell her about Riverside Commons breaking ground. "April," he'd said. "We broke ground." "I know," she'd said. "I saw it online." "The east-facing windows," he'd said. "They're in the drawings." "I know," she'd said. "Grace sent me the plans." A pause. "You know Grace," he'd said. "She came to the shelter," Nadia had said. "She spent 2 weeks here. She asked everyone what they needed. I told her about the windows." "Of course you did," he'd said. She'd almost smiled. "Marcus." "Yes," he'd said. "The unit mix," she'd said. 142 bedrooms. "Yes," he'd said. "When it opens," she'd said, "make sure the application process is accessible. Not online only. Paper forms available. Translation in the languages the neighborhood actually speaks. And outreach to shelters and transitional housing. Don't wait for people to find it. Go find them." He'd been quiet for a moment. "I'll call Daniel," he'd said. "Call Grace too," she'd said. "She'll know who to reach." "Okay," he'd said. "And Marcus," he'd said. "Build the next one faster," she'd said. He hadn't said anything. She'd known he heard her. On the Thursday, Marcus showed up to find construction already underway. He stood at the perimeter for 40 minutes. He watched the foundation go in. Not the building, the foundation. The part that nobody would see when the building was finished. The part that made everything above it possible. He thought about Nadia's mother's savings group, 12 women, 15 years, trust built through proximity. He thought about what proximity meant now. He'd been to 3 shelters in the last 3 months, 2 WIC offices, 1 community housing waitlist meeting where 40 families sat in plastic chairs and waited to hear if their number had come up. He'd sat in the plastic chairs, not in the front, in the middle, where everyone else was. He'd listened. He'd learned things that didn't appear in Daniel's models and wouldn't appear in them and needed to be learned by being there. He thought about the board visit he'd requested. 6 of the 9 board members had gone. The 3 who hadn't had their reasons. The 6 who had come back with the same expression. Not guilt, something more useful. The expression of people who had updated their understanding of what they were deciding about when they made decisions in boardrooms. That was enough. That was the start. He watched the foundation go in. He thought about what gets built into a foundation that you can't see from the outside. The decisions made before the first wall goes up. The windows that face east, because someone touring a shelter in December wanted to know what she was waiting for. The unit mix that reflects who actually needs housing rather than who the market has decided is worth building for. The displacement policy that acknowledges that transactions have consequences for people who aren't parties to them. The application process that goes out to find people instead of waiting for them to find it. None of that showed up in the building. All of it showed up in what the building was. He picked up his phone. He called Daniel. The next project, he said. I want to identify it by end of quarter. We have 3 in the pipeline, Daniel said. Not those, Marcus said. Something new. Something we wouldn't have looked at before because the margins weren't there. That's most of the affordable housing market, Daniel said. I know, Marcus said. Start there. He hung up. He looked at the foundation, at the concrete going in, at the thing that would hold everything above it without anyone ever seeing it. Build something that lasts. His mother had said that in 1992 with an envelope of savings in her hand. He was still building it. He'd just learned what last meant. Not the building. What the building made possible. Riverside Commons opened on a Tuesday in November, not a ceremony. A door unlocking at 8 in the morning and families walking in with boxes. Marcus was there, not on a stage. Near the entrance with a clipboard he didn't need, present without performing, trying to see what was actually there. He saw a woman with 2 kids and a cart with a wobbly wheel she was managing without looking at, because she was looking at the door. A man carrying a mattress with someone he'd clearly just met in the parking lot, because the mattress required 2 people. A grandmother in a good coat who stopped in the lobby and looked up at the ceiling the way people looked at ceilings when they were trying to hold something in. He didn't approach any of them. This wasn't his moment. He looked at the windows. Morning light coming through on the east side. Thin, honest. Arriving without announcement, Nadia moved in on the 3rd day. Room 4C. 2nd floor, east facing. She set Elijah down in the middle of the empty living room, 10 months old. He sat on the floor and looked around with the focused attention of someone taking stock of a new place. She went to the window. She opened it. November in Boston. Cold, specific, arrived and intending to stay. The light coming in at the angle she'd imagined when she'd stood in the shelter family room doorway a year ago and decided that east-facing mattered. It mattered. Elijah made the inventory sound. She turned around. He was looking at her. I know, she said. We're home. He went back to taking stock. She ran 2 fingers along his cheek. Present. Here. Better than fine. Subscribe if you're new. Share this with someone building something that matters. And tell me in the comments, what are you building into the foundation right now that nobody will see but everyone will live in? I read everyone. See you in the next story.